Hey, good morning everybody, and welcome to the vlog. I hope the start of your day is incredible. Of course, I'm starting my day with my beautiful Burmese python, Jeffrey, the hypogranate Burmese python. And we've all seen the headlines, right? How Burmese pythons have invaded the Everglades in South Florida and are such a major problem. And to be honest with you, they are a major problem. I'm not going to lie to you. And it's not so much that there's a bunch of giant snakes roaming around South Florida that's the biggest problem. It's more about the amount of babies they produce every year. Now, don't get me wrong, if they were 2 foot long, it wouldn't be as big of a deal, right? 18 and 20 foot snakes roaming around in an invasive way is definitely a problem, but it's really about the amount of babies they have. Now, the amount of eggs or babies that a reptile have is what's called fecundity, right? Now, a ball python like this pastel ghost right here would typically have anywhere from 4 to 10 eggs. Every now and then you might have 11, 12, 13 eggs with a really big female, and I've had clutches that were just 1 or 2 eggs, to be honest with you. So their fecundity is relatively low, right? So obviously that tells me a couple different things about things, that they don't need to produce tons of babies to survive in the wild, right? That basically means that there's probably not as much predators, or they have a really good camouflage / hiding, whatever their defense mechanism is, and a lot of the babies actually have success making it to adulthood. So when an animal has smaller clutches, that means the babies usually are better survivability. When they have larger clutches, that usually means that there not as many babies actually make it to adulthood. And again, all reptiles have different fecundity. You know, corn snakes here, like this beautiful scaleless corn snake, is typically going to have anywhere from 12, sometimes up to 30 eggs. And they're going to produce twice a year, believe it or not. So a big female corn snake could have 50 plus babies a year. Again, it kind of goes to the fact that if they're having 50 babies a year, probably all 50 of them aren't going to live. We all know that baby corn snakes can be finicky. A lot of times they get predated on. I mean, they're little tiny animals. And in all honesty, out of those 50 babies, probably only 4 or 5 of them are going to make it past their 2nd birthday, to be honest with you. And that's the way Mother Nature works. An ecosystem where a corn snake is from has predators and has natural balances in order to keep everything in check. Now with the giant snakes, it's a little different. Take, for instance, reticulated pythons. They certainly are the giants, just like all the other Burmese and anacondas and rock pythons. But you know, these guys don't have the monster clutches that the Burmese have, quite frankly. Typically, a large clutch for a retic is, you know, upper 50s, maybe 60 eggs, because they have larger eggs than Burmese pythons. And to be honest with you, it's very common for a reticulated python clutch to be in the 20s, maybe 25 to 30. When Lucy laid her last big clutch of eggs, it was 48 eggs, and she was 20 foot long, or close to 20 foot long at that point. It's absolutely amazing. Of course, the babies hatch out probably 50 to 60% larger than, say, a baby Burmese python. So they're a bigger egg, and of course they have a lower fecundity, which just basically, again, means lower number of eggs. And typically the success rate of hatching goes into that a little bit too, right? If there's a lot of eggs being laid, but few babies actually hatch, that actually can go to why they want to have more eggs as well. In this case, most pythons have a pretty high success rate when it comes to hatch, with the exception of predation of the actual eggs. So basically what you have going on with large clutches is, number one, the eggs get eaten by predators, then the babies hatch, and a lot of the babies get eaten by predators. Think of that sea turtle thing, right? When you look on the beach and there's just thousands and tens of thousands of sea turtles that are hatching and going into the ocean, and then they say very few of these will ever return as adults to this, right? Only maybe 1 or 2% actually make it to adulthood. That's what fecundity is all about. Let's get back to Burmese pythons in the Everglades. There is no doubt that there's an issue with Burmese pythons. Anyone that says, oh, there's not a problem, really doesn't understand the situation, but it really does come down to fecundity. Again, like I mentioned earlier, no doubt that the news headlines and everything else are pretty sensational when you're like 18-foot snakes taking over the Everglades. Of course, that's a major problem. But really, why did they take over the Everglades? It was really about fecundity. The fact is, my largest clutch ever from a normal Burmese python, just like my guy Snaz here, her name was actually Chloe, was 96 eggs when I was like 19 years old. That's right, 96 eggs. And there's been reports of over 100 eggs from Burmese pythons. Now, basically, where they're from in Southeast Asia, again, there's going to be be more predation, right? Their eggs are going to get eaten. When the babies are eaten, there's a lot of other predators. Down in the Everglades, there's not much predators. It's what they call apex predators. Really, the apex predator outside of humans, of course, were alligators. Well, now they're competing with Burmese pythons, right? And basically, that's almost the only things that actually keep these things in check. And actually, probably the only thing that actually eats Burmese pythons are alligators, and of course now people. Now the bigger problem is what do we do from here? Before we can even start talking about solutions, we have to understand where the root of the problem is. Where did they come from? Why are they in the Everglades? And absolutely no doubt that a small percentage would be people that buy beautifully tamed, unbelievable, cute little Burmese pythons, and then they get too big and they go, I can't get rid of these, and maybe they release them. But the truth is that's a very small percentage of the problem that happened in the Everglades. What basically happened was Hurricane Andrew hit, and when it hit, it blew out a bunch of facilities that had a bunch of Burmese pythons and washed them right into the Everglades, where a fertile breeding ground was there to wait. Again, not that many predators, perfect environment as far as temperature, humidity, perfect. You could not create a better environment in the United States other than South Florida when you're talking about mimicking where these guys are from in Southeast Asia. As soon as they were released, there it was, the opportunity for them to flourish and become invasive. And again, with that fecundity being 40, 50, up to 100 eggs, didn't take long for maybe 200 or 300 animals turn into 200,000 animals. And now the problem is that you can't really put the cork back in the bottle. Whether we like it or not, the fact is Burmese pythons are going to be in the Everglades basically forever. I mean, there's no way that we're ever going to get these guys out of there because there's so many of them and so much of the Everglades is so remote. As a matter of fact, the biggest pockets of Burmese pythons they really think are in areas that are inaccessible by humans. So there's no way we're ever going to stop it. And again, if you had 100 females producing, that could be 10,000 babies. I mean, that would be on the high side, obviously. But the fact is there might be thousands and thousands of females that are producing eggs each year. So now it's really about management, right? How can we keep them in the Everglades, make sure they don't migrate outside of the Everglades, and just basically maintain them the best we can? Don't get me wrong, there is definitely an ecological nightmare happening down there, because it's not just the fact that there's 18-foot snakes crawling around, it's that they're eating things that normally wouldn't be eaten by animals in the Everglades, except for the apex predator alligator. So it's really putting a lot of pressure on it, and I think that anything we could do to try to relieve that pressure is a good idea. The problem is that most of the measures we're doing is like putting a band-aid on cutting your arm off. So I think the lessons that are learned here is basically that we have to be more responsible as pet owners. We have to be more responsible with the way we run our facilities. Obviously, when you're in an area that an animal like a retic or a Burmese or an anaconda can thrive, there should be kind of some stop gaps to where if they do get loose, they won't thrive in the wild. Obviously, here in Michigan, we don't have that problem. Why do you think that ball pythons, which are probably the most popular snake in the country right now, aren't invasive to South Florida? Because it's not the environment for them. You could let ball pythons out, they're probably not going to thrive in South Florida, because if they would already be invasive down there. But also they have low fecundity, so they wouldn't proliferate at the rate that Burmese pythons do. So as a community, we just have to kind of police ourselves. Now, don't get me wrong, the FWC down in Florida has already made all kinds of laws making it very difficult to own these large animals unless you're doing a bunch of different things. Now, they probably overstep their bounds, to be honest, but I do understand their point to some extent, as long as it doesn't get too crazy, right? Like, let's face it, there's going to be iguanas in Florida forever, so why ban iguanas from being kept, right? There's going to be Burmese pythons in Florida forever. I can understand regulations so that there's not more Burmese pythons out there, but the fact is that if you microchip them in those areas, that's fine, because now you know where your animals are, and if your animal is found in the wild and has a microchip, then you have a penalty to pay for letting that animal go, right? But again, most of the country, 90% of the country, even when you get into central and northern Florida, Burmese pythons aren't going to really be able to survive very well. So we don't have the issue. So let's not punish the whole country because of a South Florida issue. But at the same time, we do have to realize that we have to do better as a community so that we don't have another issue like this happen anywhere else in the world. And really, there's so many tragedies when it comes to what's happening down in South Florida, but the real one that bothers me, not only the ecological one, but also it's the imagery of the hobby that bothers me. I mean, again, I've said it, if it was a 2-foot rat snake that was invasive to Florida, no one really cares. But the fact that there's an 18-foot snake roaming around, it makes headlines because it's sensational and it's crazy, and it really makes reptiles look sad. So as a community, we have to do a better job to make sure that doesn't happen. And also, we have to remember that it's not the snake's fault that they're invasive to South Florida. It's our fault. We made the mistakes, whether it was Hurricane Andrew or someone releasing animals or whatever the case is. We're still responsible because we should have done a better job, and we need to do a better job in the future to make sure that our facilities are secure, where if anything did escape their cage, they can't get out of a building in an area that could potentially be invasive. And in the end, guys, you know, everything I try to do in life is trying to get people to love these animals. And the South Florida issue is a bummer, because the fact is 9 out of 10 people that I run into outside of the reptile world that find out I'm into reptiles bring up South Florida and the Burmese python. So that's a really bad situation. I'd rather them bring up some amazing story about how reptiles are so crazily cool rather than such a tragedy like South Florida. Not all giant snakes have really large clutches or litters. Of course, anacondas are live-bearing snakes, right? And of course, Ivy and Aries are over here. And by the way, I keep saying that Ivy is doing much better. I'm so happy. I was so concerned about her that when she started to show some sickness. But again, she looks good. She's deep into shed. And we've seen some courtship with these guys. We haven't seen actual breeding yet. But with any luck, we'll hopefully produce some baby anacondas. But something like Ivy is probably going to have somewhere maybe about 15, if I'm lucky, 20 babies. And a really giant animal might have 30 babies. Very seldom will they have over 30 babies. So even though they're one of the largest bodied snakes in the entire world, you can see they have about a third of the babies as, say, a Burmese python that is actually a smaller animal than them. And again, it all comes back to that nature and the balance in nature and how it goes. In the case of the Burmese, it worked really against us because they weren't supposed to be in the Everglades. And now that they're in the Everglades without all those natural predators, they're just proliferating like crazy. And now it's become such a huge issue down there.
As you guys know, Salt's always our sweet girl, the one that we can hand off to just about anybody, and everybody loves her. Well, I personally got a little bit of a bias towards Pepper, and that's mainly because I've been working really hard to get her to be who Pepper really wants to be, and then that's honestly, she's more of a performer rather than an actual like cuddly animal. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that I've been actually doing. Now, Quinn, she's still really young, so there's not really going to be like, it's not going to be like a dog where they do it so perfectly and so seamlessly every single time, but I'm hoping to work towards that goal. Pepper. Come on, Pepper. Come on. Come on. Come on, girl. Come on up here. Come on up here. Come on. You got it. You got it. You got it. Good girl. Good girl. Up. Up. Stay. Good. Good girl. Up. 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 Stay. Up. Up. Hold it. Good girl. Good girl. Open. I know, I usually do it with pellets. Come on, there you go. That's a little bit better. There we go. Open. Good. I'll take that. Fun rubs.
I realize I got a little bit deep on you guys, but it is crazy to think that a snake could literally lay 100 eggs. I mean, that is wild for me to think of. And again, when I had that 96 egg clutch, it was crazy to see 96 little baby Burmese pythons hatch out. It was quite a spectacle, and I really, I miss it, to be totally honest with you. With that said, I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, could you do me a favor? Hit this playlist over here. You could watch a couple more videos. It helps my channel a tremendous amount. Up here, you can subscribe to my podcast channel where we talk about issues like this. On this side, you can subscribe to this channel. Get me to 3 million if you don't mind. Have an absolutely wonderful day. Remember, be kind to someone, and I promise I'll see you tomorrow.